Hey guys, Infidel 1258 here. Today I want to talk to you about DEC on the leaderboard and how that's an inflation for that token, which we are trying to find peg. And we know that that's so important. DEC being peg is so pivotal to the whole flywheel and SPS price appreciation, and really what the whole game is aiming at. Aggie has said that DEC being at peg is his most important concern because of the implications that it would have for SPS, for card prices, for attention to the game. And I think he's right. So then there's a question from the recent town hall in the FAQ portion, which we are going to feature here. And we're going to hear Aggroed answer. It's about replacing DEC in the leaderboards. If the community wanted to replace DEC in the leaderboards with something else, what would be preferable and what would the team do? Extra chests or other packs or a face market value, etc. And so with that in mind, I want to hear Aggroed comment on that question. And I want to respond to it because I've had a conversation previously on the channel about what I think we need to do with DEC and leaderboards. But I think there's maybe an evolution to that topic. So let's listen to what he has to say.
Replace DEC and leaderboards. If the community wanted to replace DEC and leaderboards with something else, what would be preferable from the team and require minimal work? Extra chests or other packs, face or market value? Other packs is funky because we don't always have them. So that might not be the best. Maybe extra chests, but the amount of DEC is so small that it's probably not worth dealing with. That it's not small to the winner, but it's small to like the community and community size. So, if, I would prefer not to have to work on that, which is why it's not a priority for the company, even though there's a tiny bit of inflation there. And we know there's inflation there. Matt and I see it as a pretty de minimis problem to try to solve. So I would request that the community chill and not worry about it. But, if you guys vote for it, we'll try to figure something out.
Okay, so there you have it. And I think there's three things that I want to talk about with respect to his response. First, before I do that, though, I think I need to say that my previous position on the DEC on the leaderboards was that if we want DEC at peg, we probably should eliminate from it the new creation of DEC. And I always go back to Aftersound, who covered this first. He, at least to me, he was the first person I saw touching the topic of DEC on the leaderboards and considering that within the growth and the inflation of that token and how that is counteractive to our desire for peg. And he talked about how there was probably something like 15 million a month being created out of that. And I could be wrong on that number a little. I think it might have been as high as 20. It might have been a little less, but we're talking millions. It's not trillions. It's not billions. Across the year, that would add up, and you start to get something meaningful, right? If it is 15 million across 12 months, you're talking like 180 million. But that's pretty nominal considering all of now the burns that we've been learning about, everything from time crystals to staking into land. Even the cost to buy a grain is done in DEC, and that's burnt. So land has I think spoken to already some of these concerns around DEC, around peg. And I think in the light of what land should be, and hear me, what land should be, I think we can take a beat on trying to find new solutions for leaderboard. I think so point number one, with respect to commenting on Aggie's points or concerns that I want to touch on, he said that it's a tiny bit of inflation. He used the word de minimis. I'd never heard that word before, by the way, like Aggie flexing the technical and educational training. De minimis. De minimis is something that is very trifling or of little importance. I love that word now. Trifling, by the way, is like an amazing word in and of itself. So shout out to Aggie. Well done, my friend. That's a great word. Word of the day. But I think he's right. I think that adjective is accurate. I think that description is accurate. It is, in the context of what we now know with respect to what land should be, I would agree that is not a significant concern any longer. If land is what it should be, and I am personally confident that land will launch, and it will begin the process of the flywheel, as I've previously talked about in other videos, and I don't want to get into here, but just suffice it to say, the sinks that land is creating both the burns as well as the staking elements for DEC are going to lock up supply, and that's going to affect the supply demand equation of DEC. And I think you're going to find that all the way up to 2.0 when we start to see the 50 new resources in land and what that does with liquidity pools and how that has a demand on a DEC, etc. I believe fully, my opinion, I believe fully DEC makes it back to peg because of what land is supposed to be. So if land fails in some capacity or in some degree, then maybe I need to revisit that topic. But to me, he's right. It's a tiny bit of inflation when you pull in what land should do for DEC. I want to bring two other topics up before we move away from the issue. He said quite clearly in there, extra packs seem like a no. Meaning, you know, your leaderboard rewards, when you are amongst the best of the best, you're getting DEC right now. 60,000 DEC for Shisha here if we finish out the season and he stays top dog. 50,000 for number 2. This is at the Gold League level, and these numbers get bigger and bigger at the higher levels. And so I'm saying the one suggestion that I've even raised is that, hey, what if instead of the 200,000 DEC for Bubkey here at the champion number 1 level, what if instead that person was receiving essentially the US dollar equivalent or the peg value equivalent, if you want to get into sort of peg value being considered in there, of packs? So that might look like this is a $200 value in a sense. And what if you were paid in Chaos Legion packs? I'm saying that means 50 Chaos Legion packs for Bubkey. But then he made the point, we don't always have packs. And I think that's a real strong concern, because I do think leaderboard payouts is an important part of the value proposition that the game offers. The reason that people want to spend their time and attention to the degree that they do, including in buying extra energy so they can play more battles, which is again helpful in that peg restoration long term. Maybe not immediately because there's just not enough demand in and of itself, but it is part of the broader picture of how DEC is used. And so I do think we want to incentivize, and leaderboard battling titles on the leaderboard are an important part of that, I think. And so he's right. If packs can't be consistent, and if they can't be kind of secured in a way and procured and set aside in a way that allows us to be reliably paying our best players for their time and attention and the leaderboard success, then I think he said they're a no. And I think that makes perfect sense. But I want to push back in one way and say they should be set aside. And I said this in a previous video. Packs moving forward should always be set aside into the DAO. I guess that makes the most sense, or maybe in the company's hands, but DAO makes more sense to me. And then we use it from a perspective of paying out our community, and the DAO can vote on this if they want, on every pack if they want. But I would argue this should be just a thing we do moving forward. We did it with, to some extent, Chaos Legion. That was a little bit of a last minute decision. Then we later did it with Rift Watchers. I think we need to institute it from day one with Rebellion, and every pack moving forward, where any packs that get burnt actually end up in the DAO and then they get distributed, maybe in a leaderboard. Now, that's a future conversation, because I'm not certain they need to be paid into the leaderboard. I'm just saying we need to have these assets set aside, not deleted. And that could be a value that the DAO is receiving, which is beneficial for every SPS holder. So that's point number 2 on the topic of what Aggie said there. But lastly, I want to just talk about one thing I've never really thought about, which seems like a simple answer to this issue of leaderboard. He talked about, somebody asked, the commenter asked, what about extra chests? That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I mean, I'm sure Bubkey and some of these high rollers, he's got these best of the best, will love their DEC. It's flexible. It allows you to buy new cards. It allows you to stake. It allows you to play the liquidity pools, etc. I'm sure they love it. But it could be an interesting consideration to say you get, I don't know, is it 100 extra chests? I don't know what the number would even be. But that would unlock new soulbounds. That might give you new packs if packs are included inside the chests, right? I would think that could be potentially very appetizing and substantive from a reward perspective. Now, I'm not a leaderboard person. I've squeaked in there once before, and that was pretty cool. I was proud of that, but I have not done that in a regular way. And so it's not really to me to maybe even say that we should change it per se, especially given the first few minutes of this video where I now agree this DEC inflation that's coming on the leaderboard has become nominal, has become largely irrelevant because of what land should do. And so I agree with what Aggroed's saying. I'm excited to think about, maybe changing things eventually, but it's nominal. It's not a big deal. He even said this, like we'd have to rethink it. We'd have to deal with it. That's a time sink, and we just don't need to because it's de minimis. I love that. Okay, guys, so let me know in the comments below what you think. Does it make sense to change this? If so, how? Which of the sort of proposals, even in the question, were sort of the most appetizing to you? And just thank you so much. And before you get into it, just thank you so much for your time and attention. Hope you have an amazing day. God bless.